Hello, my name is Jennifer Saran, and I'm the Volunteer Engagement Manager at the Los Angeles Public Library. You're muted. Lauren, you're muted.
Of course, I'm muted. Of course. Welcome, everyone. And I'm Lauren Kratz, the Librarian 3 from the Octavia Lab, a do it yourself makerspace at the Central Library. And it is our pleasure to welcome you to today's Your Author series, featuring author Janae Marks as she discusses her new book, On Air with Zoe Washington. Please feel free to use the chat box to send in your questions and comments, and they'll be answered toward the end of the program. Also, don't forget to email ecdept@lapl.org for your chance to be entered into an opportunity drawing to win a copy of On Air with Zoe Washington.
We want to thank our generous donors, the Lenore S. and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund, as well as the Library Foundation and our amazing behind-the-scenes staff for helping the library bring these author and illustrator programs to you virtually. Thank you all very much. We would also like to recognize and acknowledge the first people of this land. We recognize and acknowledge their elders, past and present, as well as their descendants. For information on which territory you may reside, check out native-land.ca.
Now, on today's Your Author program, Janae Marks is the critically acclaimed author of middle grade novels From the Desk of Zoe Washington, A Soft Place to Land, and On Air with Zoe Washington. Her novels have been named Best Book of the Year by Parents Magazine, Chicago Public Library, the Boston Globe, the Bank Street College of Education, and others. From the Desk of Zoe Washington is currently in development with Disney branded television to become an original movie executive produced by Kerry Washington. Let's welcome Janae.
Hi.
Hi, Janae. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yay. I have the book too. Yay.
Janae, before we start, can you tell us a little bit about your book covers in the back? What is that made out of?
Oh, these are just foam board. So it's like, I made the first one, the first Zoe one back, for my 2020 launch, because I thought it might be nice to have it every time I have a launch with Zoe Washington book. I feel it's important to have cupcakes or some sort of sweet treat there. So on the cupcake table, I was like, oh, let me get this. I think I'd seen somebody else have one at an event, and I thought it would be cool. So I ordered one off one of those websites. It was not expensive. It just came in and it just standed up and it looks nice. So I had to do it again for the second Zoe book.
They look great.
Thank you.
So, Janae, can you talk a little about how you came up with the idea for On Air with Zoe Washington?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of challenging to figure out how to write the sequel at first because I've never written a sequel before, so that was the first thing. But also, I knew that there were certain things from the first book that people really liked that I needed to figure out how to include those same kind of themes or elements in the second book. And the baking, that was straightforward to figure out. The friendship storyline, I was able to figure something out for that. But what I was struggling with was the mystery, because in the first book, there's such a big mystery around whether or not Marcus, her biological father, is actually guilty or innocent of the crime he's been incarcerated for. And that's like a huge part of the plot, is her solving this mystery. And so in the second book, I was like, well, now that she's kind of solved that mystery, what will be the next mystery? I couldn't figure out what would be the next logical mystery for her to solve, because this one is so personal to her. Like, she could become like the next sleuth kind of character, but it I couldn't imagine what else she'd be trying to solve that, that wasn't so personal. So I just kept getting stuck on that. But then my editor said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a mystery. It could just be, a follow-up story about these characters, and there could just be some other goal or thing that she's trying to achieve. And I was like, okay. And so once I kind of got away from thinking it had to have some big mystery, that freed me up to coming up with more ideas. And then I came up with the podcast element because in the first book was actually inspired. Like I was actually inspired to write the first book because of listening to a podcast. I actually, many of you may have listened to that podcast Serial, Serial, many years ago, and it was super popular. And the first season told the story of a possible wrongful conviction, which actually since then now has been confirmed that it was a wrongful conviction. So I was just really interested in that podcast, and it kind of got me thinking about this topic. So that the research into that I did kind of inspired me to write this book. So I was like, oh, like a podcast, like, so I think podcasts are just fresh in my mind. I still listen to them all the time. So I was like, what if Zoe did that? And I thought it could be a nice follow-up to the letters that she sends back and forth to Marcus, kind of intermixing between the chapters. Like there could be like podcast excerpts intermixing between these chapters. Like I kind of was like, that could be a nice new format for her to be playing around with. So yeah, that's kind of where that. So once I kind of, like started thinking about the things, and then the other big thing that I kind of realized is that there was an opportunity here to talk more about what life is like after incarceration, whether you're guilty or innocent. And that was like, it just felt like that could be the obvious next step in terms of her journey and learning more about like social justice issues, and go into that with Marcus and what is his life like now. And so I think like once I kind of realized where I could go, like then the idea started flowing, and that's kind of how I developed all the different, plot lines and things.
Quick follow-up question to that. Then how was the research for you, looking into not only, Zoe in the beginning, finding the freedom, oh no, I'm so sorry, the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then continuing that research in this next book too, because they also came up again, and the different lawyers and people that they worked with.
Yeah. So the Innocence Project was a really great resource for both books, because they do have a lot of information about, people that they've helped, cases that they've helped overturn. So in just reading about different people, sometimes they would share some stories about what life was like for them after they were incarcerated. And I would just like specifically look up things like that, like what are articles or firsthand accounts that I can find where people are talking about their lives after they've been incarcerated, how it affected them, and whether or not they were innocent or not. I was kind of looking at both kinds of stories. And so, yeah, I think just the internet was my first and foremost place where I just got a lot of information. But then the other thing was I had a friend of mine who actually knows somebody who works for an organization here in Connecticut that helps with reentry services for prior inmates. And so essentially this person works, with them, like this team works with people who are about to be released from prison and kind of help them get set up with education, housing, jobs, like whatever they might need. And they kind of help them and kind of mentor them through this process. And so she connected me with her so I could have a phone call with her. And on the phone call, she also invited another one of her colleagues who himself had actually been incarcerated before. So he was able to tell me also what it was like for him specifically. So that was really, really helpful. And then when I wrote the draft of the book and it was, going through the editing process, we actually had her read the drafts because I wanted to make sure somebody, who has some experience with this, or at least works with people who have experience, can read through and make sure I wasn't, making any mistakes with how I was representing this. And I also asked her things like, what do you really wish people knew, about, people who are coming out of prison? Like, I wanted to make sure that, like things that she wished people knew, like what are stereotypes that she wished people would let go of, things like that. And then I can kind of incorporate that into the kind of stuff Zoe learns about too. So that was definitely super helpful, being able to talk to her. So yeah, I mean, the information's out there. I just had to kind of go looking for it.
Thank you.
Janae, can you speak about your journey as a writer? How did you become an author, and how did you decide to write?
Yeah, so my journey was actually quite long. I realized when I was in college that I wanted to try to maybe write for publication. At that point, I was an English major, so I knew I wanted to do something with books. And I did actually work after college for a publishing company for a few years. So I knew that I was interested in books, but I didn't necessarily know I wanted to write books until I started taking some creative writing classes and realizing like, I'm really interested in this. And then I even took a literature class my senior year of college where we specifically read children's books. So that kind of reminded me how much I loved books for kids, and that kind of inspired me as well. So then after college, I ended up going back to school to get a master's in creative writing, specifically in writing for children from the New School. And that's sort of where I started my journey. but I was brand new. I didn't know a single thing. So I wrote my very first novel, during that program, and then started sending it out, sometime after it. But it took another 10 years, and 4 books to finally get that book deal. So the first From the Desk of Zoe Washington book was my 4th manuscript that I ever wrote, but the first one to get published. So it took many years of sending different things out, trying different things to finally make it. So when I go to school visits, I'm always talking about how perseverance is one of the biggest skill sets you need to have, when trying to pursue something like this, and that you just have to keep going, because a lot of times, it's about not only your talent, but also luck and timing. You never know what could happen or whether you'll find that right idea. So it was a long journey, but definitely has since proven to be worth it. I definitely don't regret any of it. And I think all of those hardships that I experienced helped me, today. I feel like it's good to have had that experience. I feel even more grateful for what I get to do now.
So how does your background and youth experience influence your writing?
I think especially being a middle grade writer, it's hard not to think about your own middle grade self when you're writing about that age group. So I think I'm always just thinking and putting myself into these characters' shoes and thinking about what was it like for me when I was 12. I would say the biggest place where a lot of my I really think back to what it was like for me is in the friendship stories in the book, just like the dynamics of friends and how, and they're not exactly based on my life, but, just the way that things change in middle school, and your friends that you had in elementary school may not be the same ones you have by the time you get out of middle school. And I feel like Zoe goes through that in both books, like just things are changing, things are shifting. It's not always staying the same. And she struggles with that a little bit. And I feel like I struggled with that too as a kid. I really liked, I really wanted everything kind of to stay the same sometimes. Like change was hard for me at certain points. So I definitely feel like I pull from those kind of memories. I think there's just different, it's just hard. It's when you're writing for that age group, you really do start to put your head into their head, and you start to try to put yourself in their shoes when you're writing about them. So I do think that even though I'm not writing exact experiences for my life, I feel like my childhood self definitely feels represented in some ways in these characters.
And that's why when they're reading your books, they feel like they can relate because they're going through the same thing.
And I think, and so many of these experiences are universal and are not any different now than it was when I was that age. Like these are things that continue to happen and affect kids, for generations.
Janae, what do you hope readers take away from your books?
Well, I would say, number one, I write books first and foremost to really entertain kids, get them excited about reading and, just have fun reading the books. Cause that's what I liked when I was a kid. I really just had fun reading them, books when I was a kid and, even now. So that's first thing. And then secondly, I hope that they feel hope from these stories. Obviously these 2 books in particular have like some tough topics in them and, but I think they both, kind of end on a hopeful note. And I hope that readers feel hope from them and also maybe feel inspired by them. The way that Zoe really uses her voice and stands up for what she thinks is right. I had somebody ask me, like, is this like how you were as a kid? And I'm like, no, like I definitely felt strongly about things, but I was really shy. Like I would not necessarily go, and do something that bold. Like I just never was as bold as she was. So I was writing for like a kid that I kind of maybe wished I could have been more like her. So yeah, maybe kids will feel inspired to also do bold things because they definitely have what it takes, to use their voice to make change. So that's another thing. And then maybe they'll also just be inspired to learn more about these issues too. Whether it's, I've even had readers say like, I want to be a lawyer after reading this book, like maybe they'll really be inspired to like actually grow up and try to make change in these issues, but also maybe they'll just be inspired to like bake and, have fun and, do things like that too. So I would say that's it.
Were you inspired to bake after you wrote these?
A little bit. Yeah. Like I actually am not a huge baker, but the reason why I decided to make her into a baker is because I'm obsessed with those baking competition shows that are everywhere. Pretty much every single one that exists, I've watched at least a season, and if not all of the seasons. And I especially love on the Food Network, the Kids Baking Championship show, which is what the show that Zoe wants to be on in the first book is basically based on. because the kids, they're so inspiring and talented at such a young age. And even though I don't bake that much, you can learn so much about baking from watching these shows, because of course, like by the time they get judged, the judges will say what they did right, what they did wrong. And like, you just kind of watch them doing it and you're like, I know I could totally do this, even though I'm not that, I'm okay. But yeah, I definitely baked more. I actually challenged myself to make a cupcake recipe every month in the months leading up to the first Zoe Washington book's release. And then I shared the recipes on my newsletter. And so I challenged myself to bake these different flavors that I normally never bake. And yeah, and I think it's kind of inspired me to do a little more baking, at home with my daughter and stuff like that. When before I really wasn't baking too often.
Did you make the cupcake with Fruit Loops on top or any other type of cereal?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I definitely tried those out. And I even put the recipe on my website if anybody does want to make them at home too. And they're pretty good. And and I've definitely seen I've seen readers make them and have that be like an activity they do with reading the book. And I think that's been pretty cool. I never expected that to happen, but it's been pretty cool that kids can read, can also bake, the same stuff that Zoe was baking. And there's a recipe that she bakes in the second book too that I'm planning to upload. I won't spoil what it is, but I will upload it. This time I haven't made these ones myself. It's a little more complicated, I feel like, for me, but maybe I'll give it a try.
Well, we're looking forward to that for sure. So, Janae, can you tell us, do you have your own podcast? Or if not, what is your favorite podcast to listen to?
I do not have my own podcast, but I do really like listening to them. I would say the ones that I listen to the longest that I really like, I like a lot of the storytelling ones where you kind of hear real stories about real people. So like This American Life is super popular for that reason. It's like every episode's a theme and they just kind of tell these real interesting stories and you kind of get snippets of people's lives. So that's one that I kind of always go back to. I'm trying to think of what other really good ones. There's some random ones that I've really liked recently. Like I discovered the Office Ladies podcast because I liked the show, but I just really like their friendship dynamic. The two, Angela and oh gosh, now I'm going to forget her name. Jenna. Yeah. The two characters from the show, just their dynamic and their friendship as they're recapping the series is just so fun to listen to. So even though I haven't watched the series in a while, I remember a lot of the episodes. I really enjoy that one. I lately have been less into like the true crime ones, which like Serial is like that. And I used to really be into those and now more into the like fun, like light, ones, because I feel like the world is so heavy that I just don't want to listen to heavy things. So I've been trying to listen to ones. And then I also listen to some, creative ones, like ones where writers get interviewed or things like that. Like, and actually I was just on a podcast there's this really wonderful tween. His name is E-Train and he has a podcast and he just interviewed me the other day and he's very much like the same age as Zoe. And so I was like, see, like kids can actually, and he interviews authors on his podcast. So that was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Janae, I'm going to have to ask you about E-Train and where we can listen to his podcast.
Oh yeah. I think for sure, if you just Google E-Train podcast, it has a more official name, but that's if you were to type in E-Train podcast on YouTube, I think he has a YouTube channel and I think it streams to the different podcast streaming sites. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun to listen to. I will be checking that out. So Janae, I know you said earlier about perseverance and sharing that with the children, especially the class visits that you visit. What are some other things you know now that you wished you knew when you were first starting out in your respective fields?
That's a good question. I think that number one, I wish I could just tell myself, like, it's okay if it takes a long time. It's okay if it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't mean that you are not talented or worthy of reaching this goal. It's just a lot of it is out of your control. And I knew some of this at the time, but I still think it was hard at different points to keep going. I definitely never quit, but I definitely had to take a step back or take a break. especially when, as I was meeting more and more writers through, different writing groups I would be part of or conferences I would go to, and I would get to see some of those writer friends start to make those next moves and find an agent or a book deal or whatever. And I was very happy for them, but it's like, when is it going to be my turn? It's like hard not to have those feelings. So I never really wanted to feel that way. So sometimes you just got to take a step back and just focus, eyes on your own paper almost, like don't really worry about what other people are doing, because it's not a real competition. Like everybody has the potential to sell a book. Like there's no competition in that sense. Like there's enough space for everybody. So yeah, I think just remembering that it's okay, if it takes a longer time. I thought, especially because I had been part of this master's program and so many alumni from my program went on to publish right away, that like I should be publishing right away. And it kind of made me feel bad that I wasn't, but it's okay. Because sometimes, again, it's just really a matter of, you just didn't have the right book at that right time, but just keep going and eventually you will find it. And that was definitely the case for me. So yeah, I don't know. I think I had to like let go of the guilt of that, of how long it took.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because some people may struggle with the letting go or maybe internalize some of the anger. And not that you did, but what would you recommend for someone who is just so frustrated? Like, besides like, what did taking a step back look like? And were there any like meditations that you did, or, physical activities that helped you, like running, walking, to really kind of power through that and help you persevere? Do you have any recommendations for people out there?
Yeah, I could see how physical activity would be helpful. I definitely did not lean on that. I feel like I'm always trying to improve my physical activity. I would say one thing that I did was, I think, just try to focus more on what do I have control over, because you can't control whether or not an agent will want to sign you for representation or whether a publisher will want to publish your book, but you can control whether or not you can be the best writer you can be. So I would say, okay, I'm going to try my absolute best to improve my writing by reading craft books about different areas of the craft, or going to conferences. I went to so many different conferences and workshops over the years, and that's putting money out that like you don't know if you'll make back by selling a book. But I made the point to invest in myself, I guess, by putting myself in those spaces to learn more and learn as much as I possibly could, to just kind of prepare myself, put myself in the best position possible. And yeah, I think that was kind of what I did and I think stepping back also just meant like maybe just not focusing so much on what other people are doing, like still be happy for my friends that also were, in the same journey with me and had already, passed all these milestones that I was still hoping to get to. But also like, just, I can send them a quick congrats, but also like turn off social media and like just not look at it, so I'm not being bombarded with everybody else's good news, and maybe just take a step away and just focus on my own book and just kind of get excited about my own story again. And really just focus on that, because that's literally the only thing you have control over is your own story. Everything else is so much reliant upon outside people, gatekeepers and things. So I think that was kind of what it looked like for me. It was just kind of just deciding I'm going to focus on my book and try not to pay attention to everybody else or what's going on in the industry, and just try to take it one step at a time. Yeah.
That was definitely a theme on the Air with Zoe Washington. Actually focus on what you can control.
Yeah,
I caught that.
Yeah. I don't even know if I was like consciously doing that. I guess maybe that was a subconscious thing that I had to explore for myself.
There is a lot of Zoe between you and Zoe. There's a lot of similarities there. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it's true. The perseverance for sure. Yeah.
All right. So, what was the last best thing you ate, read, watched, and experienced? I could repeat it too if you need it. That's a lot.
So last week I got to go to a bookstore for my release day. It was Riverbend Books up in West Hartford, Connecticut, and they had provided from this local bakery this like tray of sweet treats. So I mean, I may have eaten, I don't know if I've eaten, this is the first thing that came to my mind. They had some really good cookies in there that was like, they had cupcakes too, but I'm more of a cookie person actually. That was delicious. I think the place that they ordered from is Brown Butter Creations up in Connecticut. But it was very good. So that was probably the last really good thing that I ate. What was the next one? Red?
Yeah.
Red. Well, I would love to shout out a book that I read that just came out. So I might have read a couple other things since then, but I loved this book and it just came out. It's called Not an Easy Win by Crystal D. Giles. She is another middle grade author. This book came out, I think it's coming out on Tuesday. So it might have a couple more days, but it's her second novel and it has some similar themes to Zoe books. So the character there, Lawrence, also has an incarcerated parent. And you actually don't even meet him in the book at all, but you kind of get to know what it's like for Lawrence having this parent not be around and how it affects his life. And then Lawrence ends up getting into chess sort of inadvertently, and that kind of ends up changing his life. And I kind of liked the parallels too about how like an activity could really be that release for you and things like that. So yeah, I really liked, the title is Not an Easy Win by Crystal D. Giles. So that one was really excellent, and I feel like, Zoe fans will probably like it.
Thanks for the read-alike. So the next one is, what was the best thing you watched?
Oh, gotta think.
Or listened to.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I watch such random things. Let's see. Well, okay. Well, this is a hard one. Let's go with in the baking theme or like baking competition show theme. There is a current season of Kids Baking Championship that I am really enjoying. So if you don't have, you should watch it. It's kind of my like when I need to relax kind of show. I watch all those random shows.
They're always fun. And so what was the last best thing you experienced?
Probably getting a chance to, I can use yesterday as an example. Yesterday I did a full day. It was an exhausting day, but it was a really fun day of school visits at some local schools. And actually the day before that, the other really cool thing that I experienced that was honestly pretty unexpected was finding out that On Air with Zoe Washington is a New York Times bestseller. That was not something I thought was going to happen to me. So that was amazing to experience that phone call from my agent telling me that news.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. That must have been so wonderfully unexpected.
Yeah, for sure.
Janae, thank you for sharing that. Chris, what was the read-alike? Can you say that again?
Crystal D. Giles. And Not an
Crystal
Easy
D.
Win.
Giles.
Yeah.
Not an easy win. Okay, great. So I'm going to place a hold on that when it comes out next week. Are there any other authors or illustrators that you find inspiring, and why?
So many. I'm just trying to think of who else to shout out. I mean, there's so many that everybody knows about, like that, have come before me that inspired me when I was, preparing or getting ready to write Zoe or in the midst of writing the first one. Especially because Zoe was my first middle grade book. The books that I'd written before that didn't end up getting published were more young adult. So I kind of realized through Zoe that I'm much more suited to middle grade, which is kind of part of that perseverance journey thing, because I think part of it was me just taking the time to realize where I'm best suited. But anyway, so like there's definitely lots of authors that inspired me that I read, like Jason Reynolds or Jewel Parker Rhodes, authors who kind of wrote about also tough topics and were able to make it work for middle grade. But in terms of other authors now, I mean, I don't know. There's so many. Honestly, like there's so many books out there and so many really great authors out there. It's hard to choose. I don't know. It's such a hard answer. But yeah, those are some examples of ones that I've read over time that I really enjoyed, inspired me.
Oh, great. Because, I mean, it's always nice to know who inspires the creators that we get to speak with and that when we get to read their creations, but think about where they started from. Do you have any thoughts of maybe doing books with illustrations?
Yeah, I would love to. I actually really would love to write a picture book. I don't have it. It would be something totally new that I'd have to really learn how to do. But especially because my daughter, she's 7. So, I mean, up until this point, we've been reading a lot of picture books and chapter books. And I think it'd be fun to write younger, even a chapter book that has more illustrations in it would be fun. So definitely would love to. We'll just have to see. But because it's definitely branching into newer, at least with a picture book, like newer territory for me. But I think it could be a fun challenge to try to write one day. And I definitely love, seeing the illustrations in picture books, like even the illustrator who illustrated both of my these covers, Morel Ortega, is now a picture book author herself too. And I mean, it's just so fun. I mean, her illustrations are so beautiful. Anyway, I think it would be so wonderful to see your words get illustrated like in a whole book like that. So that'd be really cool.
So tell us, how can our fans stay in contact with you? Is there a social media, a website, or an email they can use?
Yeah, so my website is janaemarks.com. If you go to the contact me, there is an email listed there if anybody has questions or wants to send me a note. And on social media, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Janae Marks Books. And those are the primary places I am. And happy to hear from anybody. And also on my website, I mentioned earlier about the cupcakes, but also there's a playlist of songs from the first Zoe book. I need to still upload the playlist for the second book because there's still a couple additional songs in the second book too. So I'll upload that one as well. But yeah, if you want to listen to some of the music, which were like songs from my adolescence, actually. So it was kind of fun to pick those out, some of them.
Yeah, I heart your music playlist. I actually went searching for Little T's playlist and I didn't find it until I used the book titles.
It's on Spotify under From the Desk of Zoe Washington, and it's also on my website under like the book extras tab. So you definitely can check it out. Yeah. It's been fun because again, other libraries and teachers who will read these books with their book clubs and things will also like sometimes have them listening to the songs, and it's been fun to see them enjoying it.
Would you add more music to the playlist that wasn't mentioned in any of your books?
I could maybe like have like a, if you liked, you'll also like kind of thing. So yeah, that'd be fun.
Janae, I know you said that, you possibly maybe a picture book in the future. What's next for you right now?
So I'm working on another middle grade novel that will be out next year, but the title and all that stuff hasn't been determined yet. But what's cool about this one for me is I'm taking a little bit of a departure from just straight contemporary, and this one's gonna have a little bit of magic in it, which is really new for me. I had to do my own kind of research for that, like how do you write magic? But it was really fun to write. I'm getting ready to start revising it, and it'll be out sometime next year. I'm not exactly sure what the date is or the title. We're still figuring that out, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Sounds great.
Like, did you learn like magic tricks?
No,
Illusion?
like more like how do you write, like if somebody does a spell, like how do you write a spell?
Oh,
like
okay.
I don't know, like or like literally just like logistics of explaining the magical stuff. Like I'm like asking my friends who write more spooky magical things, like how do you do this, like what? And then like my editor at certain points, I'm like, I feel like I'm trying to make this make sense, and then she'll say like, but it's magic, it doesn't have to make sense, like certain things you can just have happen. So I thought that was it's just like a different set of things to know about, because with realistic fiction for my previous books, I'm always making sure that everything makes sense, that everything is logical, that like as best as it can be, I'm trying to make it feel really realistic. I'm literally looking up things, like when she takes the train, like what are the train stops specifically that she's on, because if people take the train in Boston, they'll recognize it, things like that. And with this, it's like it's still contemporary, but it's almost like magical realism, where it'll take place in our world, but with just some magic. So a lot of it still is realistic stuff, but in terms of the magic stuff, I was like, how do I explain these phenomenons that are happening? Like, and they're like, just make it up, and you're like, how? So it was just new for me, but it was fun.
Okay, thank you. I was gonna ask, like, did you like
not magic
rabbit out of the hat, like? So my actual question was, do you think you'll be coming out for the LA Times Festival of Books in April, or doing any other upcoming virtual or in-person book festivals?
Yeah, I would love to come to the LA Times Festival of Books. Hopefully, I won't be there this April, but maybe I could come next year. That would be awesome. I will put that into the universe. Yeah, I'll definitely be at a few other things this year. Next week, actually, I'm going to be at the Tucson Book Festival, which I hear is a big one. I've never been out there or to that festival, so that'll be cool. But yeah, I hope that I'll get a chance to go to more places.
Before we enter into our rapid fire questions with Janae, we just want to check the chat to see if anyone has any questions for Janae about On Air with Zoe Washington or anything about being an author or writing. We'll just give everybody just a second. And while we're waiting for that, we just want to mention again, don't forget to email ecdept@lapl.org for your chance to be entered in an opportunity drawing to win a copy of On Air with Zoe Washington. Again, email ecdept@lapl.org.
There is one question I saw. Someone wanted to know, what is your revision process like, or what is the revision process like for an author?
Yeah. So first, I end up doing kind of like, so when I'm writing the first draft, before I send it to my editor, which before I was published, I worked with a critique group. So there'd be a lot of times I would write a first draft and then I would send them chapters at a time, or, maybe like the first 50 pages and then the next set, or things like that. And they would give me feedback and I would go back and revise based on their feedback until I kind of had gone through the whole book with them, and then maybe send it to new people the next time for the next round. But now I kind of don't really have the time to send to critique partners because I often just have a deadline to my editor and I don't really have time to kind of write it for her to read. So I'm always kind of doing some light revisions as I go through the first draft, to make sure it's like not a super big mess. But of course, like it's okay if it's somewhat of a mess because it's the first draft. So the first step after sending that first draft over to my editor is that she'll read it and then send me an edit letter. So essentially she'll go through the manuscript on her, computer, and some people print it out too, and just write out some comments, using track changes or comments in the Word document. And then also send an email or make a Word document, a separate document where she just writes out paragraphs about her thoughts, so it'll be the good things, like things that she really liked, and also things maybe like more larger issues. So not getting into the nitty gritty of like sentence level stuff yet, but like, larger things that we should change. So we'll do a big round first, and then sometimes another kind of like next, another round that might be a little bit smaller, set of changes. And then the last round that we'll do is more like the line editing. Like she'll go in and actually fix like sentence level, if a comma is missing, or, or if like there's a word change that needs to be made. And then next you have like a proofreader and a copy editor come in, and they have to really check all of that, like nitty gritty details. Like so far as like, again, I mentioned earlier, having Zoe take the train, like they went and like made sure that the train stops actually were right, since I was trying to be realistic about it. So they'll like check also not only grammar and things like that, but I'll also check, consistency stuff. Like if character is wearing one thing in the beginning of the chapter, but all of a sudden at the end of the same chapter, nothing's happened and they're now wearing something else. Like they'll tell you like, oh, you had your character change all of a sudden, they'll fix those errors for you, or at least address them and let you know about them so you can fix them. So yeah, it's a lot of different rounds, back and forth. So by the time you get to the part when the book's about to come out, you've read this book so many times that often you're like so tired of it, but you're just excited to be done. But yeah, I actually really enjoy the editing process more than the first draft process, because I really like taking what is already there and getting a chance to fix it instead of writing things brand new. I feel like it's more stressful to see a blank page than to see a page with a bunch of notes on it that I have to address. Like it gives me a purpose. Like, okay, I see the notes. I already have the words. I just have to fix them, versus like it's a blank page. And I'm like, even if I have an outline, it can be scary. So I like revisions.
So is that ice cream shop real? Is it JP Licks?
It is actually. So JP Licks is a real ice cream shop. And they, because I think I tagged them or something, or maybe other people would go there and be like, your book is in this, your shop is in this book. They actually reached out to me at one point after the first book came out, and they did like an interview on their blog. So yeah, it's a real ice cream shop. So if you're in the Boston area, you should go. It's really good. And the area that sorry,
Janae, with red velvet, because Zoe and her dad were eating.
So that one I think I made up. I don't know if they actually have that one, but they do have a lot of other really cool flavors, and maybe they'll be inspired to add that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
That one I needed that to be its own thing, and I was like, it's something they would do. So I'm not sure if they've ever done it. But yeah, if anybody's in the Boston area, you should check them out. They have multiple locations, and even the exact one that she goes to in the book is the one that I went to when I was in college, because I set the book in Boston because I went to college nearby. And so the areas where she spends time in is like where I went to college. So it was fun. So I also kind of was able to relive some memories of my time in that area when I was writing it.
Well, since you mentioned your undergrad, is that where you also went for graduate school?
No, so I went to Tufts University up in the Boston suburbs for undergrad, and then went to the New School in New York City for graduate school.
Ah, okay. Thank you. That was one of our questions actually from the audience.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. So what was your favorite then ice cream flavor? I'm sorry, I love ice cream, especially in cold weather.
Oh,
What's your favorite
yeah.
ice cream flavor?
My go-to flavor at JP Lux was their coffee Oreo flavor. So coffee ice cream with Oreos mixed in. So instead of being like cookies and cream, it was coffee ice cream. I just really like coffee ice cream. I really like Oreos. It's like the perfect combination. So anytime I go back, I always tend to get that flavor again because I really like it.
Oh gosh, looks up next plane flight to Boston. Just for ice cream.
The cupcake shop in the book is made up, though. Though the neighborhood that the cupcake shop is real, Beacon Hill. That's a real neighborhood. I did make up the cupcake shop because I don't actually know. I've never actually been to a cupcake shop there, so I was like, I will make this one up. And since so much is done in that shop, I was like, this is probably one that I should make up. But yeah.
Shall we start the rapid fire questions?
Sure.
You taking this one, Lauren?
You can go ahead.
All right, then I will fire away. Would you rather be a cook or a baker?
Oh, probably a cook because I actually really like savory food more than dessert. I do like dessert, but I love eating real savory food.
Would you rather be a bird or a mountain?
A bird.
If you needed to hide an elephant, where would you do it and why?
Hide an elephant. This is a funny question because the mascot at my undergrad is an elephant. Okay. So actually maybe I would hide it on campus somewhere because people would probably be like thinking it's one of the other statues. They have a couple elephant statues on campus. So maybe if I like put it in the right spot, they would just think it's an elephant statue and they'd be like, oh, look, another jumbo. Like it's good.
That was a really good answer.
That just came to me. I was like, wait.
What's more annoying, soft talkers or loud talkers?
Oh, probably loud talkers, only because like sometimes loudness, like when things get really loud, I start to be like, it's too much. I think I could listen to a soft talker in a certain environment, but if people get too loud, sometimes it's just too much stimulation for me. So
So would you rather be in a Netflix documentary as the subject or as the opponent of the subject?
Oh, like the enemy of the subject? I guess I'd rather be the subject. I hope nobody thinks I'm their enemy. I don't want to be anybody's enemy or opponent.
If you could only have entertainment from one decade, which one would it be?
Like of all the different kind of forms, I guess I'd probably pick books because, books, of course. Although I would definitely miss music and movies for sure, but I think I would be happy enough with books.
And if you could be trapped in a specific movie or book forever, which would it be?
I feel like it's an easy out to say the Zoe Washington books because it's like based on realistic stuff. But I feel like I probably would go with that. If it was a movie, maybe
you can't say Zoe Washington because that's being made into one movie.
It's not out yet. Maybe like one of the like animated ones, like either like I'm thinking like Zootopia or like Sing, like one of the like ones where like I could be an animal in one of those animal worlds that look so fun. like just being, I love those those are fun.
I also love that answer. Who is one person, famous or not, that you would love to sit down with for a long conversation?
I do think, there are some really amazing authors that would be really interesting to like be able to meet and really sit down with them. Because I've got a chance to meet tons of authors along the way, but some of those, again, those like authors that have been around for so long and have so much knowledge to share, like maybe Jacqueline Woodson, somebody like her, I bet would be like amazing to just talk to her for an hour about like, how did you do all this? Like, tell me all like, share your wisdom.
I have to go back to the movie answer. Then what animal would you want to be? Like in Zootopia or Sing?
Yeah. I don't know. In the past when they've said like, what's your favorite animal? I've always said dog, but I feel like in those kind of ones, you can be more exotic animals. It would be fun. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe like a red panda. They're just so cute. Like in that other movie.
Red
in the
or Sing
other
Red, something like that?
Yeah. Maybe a cute red panda and a red panda family.
That would definitely be fun. A few more questions. I have a few more questions. What then is your favorite food to cook?
Well, I'm still like not that I'm an okay cook, but my favorite food to eat that I also will cook is pasta. Some type of pasta. I just love. If I go to a restaurant and there's like a really good sounding pasta on the menu, I'm almost always gonna get that. It's so good.
Do you have any favorite recipes then for pastas? Like white sauce, red sauce, pestos?
I like vodka sauce. I've only made it a couple times from scratch myself, but it's actually really good and not that hard to make. It's not something I make all the time. I remember actually in high school, my friends, some of my really close friends and I would always go to this restaurant in our town that had really good penne alla vodka. And we would always, and it was one of those family style places. So we could just get a huge thing and like all share it. And then I remember one time you're like, we're going to make it ourselves. And so we like went over to my house and we made it from scratch. And it was so good. So it actually is really, I would say that's probably my favorite one.
Really quick. Speaking of pastas, what about mac and cheese recipe?
I get asked a lot. So that one was one that like I just Googled around. I don't have like a specific one, but I should probably try to see if I can like find what's closest to what I like put in there. I'm still honestly trying to find my like the best macaroni and cheese recipe because we often have it for like Thanksgiving and things. And I've been trying to find different ones and playing around. I feel like I still need to figure that out for myself. Like what is my favorite recipe? But I think I did base the one in the book on something. I should try to pull that up and put it on the website because I do get asked about that too.
Would you consider a cookbook, a Zoe Washington and Marcus?
I would do that if somebody else, like a chef and a bake, like I could be like with an actual chef and an actual baker because I cannot develop a recipe for my life. But that would be really fun if it was like in collaboration with actual people. That could be really cool. Like like almost like recipes that parents can do with their kids too. Because it's like that's actually an idea. I just don't have the skill, so I'd have to have somebody like we'd have to pull in some people and have them do the recipes and maybe I could just write little something in the beginning and I could just leave it the rest to them because I don't know anything about developing my own recipes. But yeah, that would be really fun.
I'm gonna put it in the universe though, so maybe you'll get it in.
Collins, if anybody's watching, let's do it.
Yeah.
Janae, is that why you had Marcus's dream to be opening a restaurant of his own? Is to have that connection with Zoe because she loves to bake? What gave you the idea to give Marcus that dream of opening his own restaurant?
Yeah, well, I thought that from the first book, that was one of the things that kind of connected on. I think she mentioned that she likes to bake and he talks about cooking and like, that's when he kind of mentioned the macaroni and cheese recipe. So I felt like, it just made sense that now that he's out, like if I can even kind of go further with that, like have this be more of a dream of his and that, it really could be another way for them to bond. And that was kind of the goal, was thinking of a way that they could bond in the second book once he was out of prison. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. In the book though, did you struggle, or how was it writing the family dynamics too? Because not only the friends you talked about, how they had some struggles, with each other, but even within the families too, there was a little bit of struggle there. How was that for you to, map it out and, really put it in the book, because I'm not gonna lie, I found it so
Yeah.
easy to relate to. You put it so, eloquently and just so easy to reach. How was that for you?
I think it was somewhat of a challenge, but in some ways, I would say in the first book, the bigger challenge I think was figuring out Zoe and her mom's dynamic around the Marcus situation and like how to figure that part out, because she's not in the first book, it's pretty clear early on that she doesn't really support, she wouldn't like the idea of Zoe communicating with him, because she kind of was like moved on and just wants her to move on as well. And so like navigating that and like what makes sense, and trying to put myself almost into the mom's shoes a little bit too, because a lot of people are like, I don't understand why she would let her, not let her write to her dad, and like, but she had her own reasons, and trying to, put myself into her shoes as well. But in the second book, I think the dynamic I focused on mostly was the challenge that Zoe was having between like, now that Marcus was out, like, how do I have this, my stepdad, who I've considered my dad, since I was a like small child, and now my biological dad is here and he's around. So like, how do I navigate like balancing these two relationships? And, I realized that like, we didn't really get a lot of her stepdad's perspective in the first book. He's just kind of there a little bit here and there, but we don't really hear a lot about what he thinks. Mainly because the focus was more on Zoe and Marcus. But in this one, I was like, I really want to explore more what he thinks, how he's feeling. And of course, he's not going to share with Zoe like all the bad stuff. He's not going to be like, I hate this, like to her face, But so I tried to show that like there are moments where he feels awkward, or, certain moments make him feel bad. Like if Zoe would prefer to hang out with Marcus, and, and then having Zoe recognize that and just try to how to navigate that, was definitely, so I think realizing that I wanted to have that tension, that was an easy choice, but figuring out how to execute it was the part that I had to kind of, finesse, because it was, I don't want either of them to be the bad guy. But, I did want to show how they struggle with it.
Yeah, it was I think you did a great job doing that for me, because I was wondering too, what's going on. So thank you for that.
I know. Yeah.
I really appreciated all of the struggles that you included for, a middle grader. Like you said, we were all middle graders once, right? We've experienced something
Yeah.
very similar. So
we're just checking in to see if there's any more final questions for Janae before we sign off. If you have any questions for Janae about being an author or on air with Zoe Washington, please put them in the chat. In the meantime, for the final time, if you are interested in a copy of On Air with Zoe Washington, don't forget to email ecdept@lapl.org for your chance to be entered in an opportunity drawing to win a copy of On Air with Zoe Washington. Well, we want to thank you so much, Janae, for your time and for bringing Zoe Washington to life, because she felt like a real life character to me, a real life person. So thank you so much for all of your work and creativity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's really been great to get a chance to talk about the second book, especially because I often am trying to not talk too much about it if people haven't read the first one. So it's exciting to get a chance to actually dig into some of the things that happened in the second one.
Well, I feel like reading both, I feel like each one can stand on its own, because in the On Air with Zoe Washington, you need enough background that you would be able to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I did have a bookseller tell me that she, only got a chance to read the second one, and she felt like, I was like, oh, how was that for you? Because I actually really had no idea how that would work out. And she said, yeah, like I felt like with all the context that you add in, throughout, like you can gather what happened in the first book and still enjoy it. So that's good to know, because I know that, sometimes kids do read things out of order, and, and it's fine. So that's good to know.
yeah, your books are definitely one of those you can read. I know my daughter picked it up while I was reading it and started reading it on her own. And yeah, you could definitely pick it up and then go back to the first one.
Yeah.
To see what's there. So I have one more question, actually. Do you have your own stationery like Zoe?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I did order. So I don't have like official stationery, but I did order this like notepad that has from the Desk of Janae Marks on it, so that when readers Or if I get some sort of reader mail, or like I'm honestly like I've been really bad about responding to snail mail. I'm really good at email because like it's just easier. But sometimes I use it when I'm sending something out. Like I've definitely sent out things to readers or people who've requested things like book plates, or and I'll use this little note and I'll add a note to it using that little notepad stationery thing. So it's not official stationery, but yeah, it's been fun. And also I made my like newsletter. I called my newsletter From the Desk of Janae Marks. So definitely playing with the with the theme for sure.
Next project, On Air with Janae Marks.
I know. I don't think I would make a podcast, but you never know. I feel like so much goes into it. I don't know, but yeah, we'll see.
I think you're going to inspire children.
It was fun to write the little podcast. Yeah, there's so many kids that write them, and it was fun to write the little excerpts in the book, like kind of remembering the format of what I've listened to on a podcast, especially the first one in the book that she's on. When the very first thing you read in the book is she's on a podcast with Marcus, and just like it was kind of funny because you're like, I know exactly how this format would go. I've heard so many of these kind of podcasts before, so that was kind of fun.
Well, thank you again so much, Janae. This has been such a wonderful chat to learn more about you, your writing process, everything that went into creating Zoe, because now Zoe is a mainstay in our libraries and a lot of our personal shelves as well. So we hope you enjoyed your time with us.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. And I loved all your questions, especially the quickfire ones, which were fun.
Yes, those are always so much fun to do with our authors. Gets in the nitty gritty and learn so much more about them.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to thank everyone joining us today on live stream. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Janae Marks. And remember to visit lapl.org/events. That's EVENTS to see more of our amazing programs.
And we also want to mention that the Los Angeles Public Library is celebrating its 150th anniversary. So please check out the 150th celebration landing page at lapl.org/150 for all the upcoming events, and also join the 150th anniversary challenge. And I'd just like to quickly mention that I am recording from the Octavia Lab. It's a do-it-yourself makerspace at the Central Library. And if you are interested in using podcasting equipment and starting your own podcast like Zoe Washington, please join us in the Octavia Lab. Children, teens, and adults can all use the podcasting equipment in the Octavia Lab. Until next time, we truly appreciate all your support. The success of all of our library programs could not happen without viewers like you. So thank you.